You're losing to yourself daily, sabotaged by your own lack of discipline, defeated by impulses you cannot control, watching others succeed through self-mastery while you remain enslaved to weaknesses, failing not because world is against you, but because you cannot command yourself, and losing everything winnable because you never learned that mastering yourself is prerequisite for winning at anything, making victory possible that self-enslavement makes permanently impossible. This self-defeat is systematically destroying your potential by ensuring internal chaos prevents external success, destroying your opportunities by making you unreliable to yourself and others, destroying your relationships through inability to control reactions, destroying your health through lack of self-discipline, and destroying your future by guaranteeing that without self-mastery, you cannot win at anything that matters, while those who master themselves win consistently. Mastering yourself is not suppressing who you are but commanding your actions, not becoming emotionless robot but controlling responses, and not perfection but developing capacity to direct yourself toward goals despite resistance. This audiobook teaches self-mastery through the framework for conquering internal enemies, the practices that build self-command, the disciplines that create internal control, the methods for overcoming self-sabotage, and the systematic approach to mastering yourself, making winning possible that self-enslavement makes impossible. Stop losing to yourself and start mastering self-command. Stop being controlled by impulses and start winning through discipline. Master your reactions, control your behaviors, overcome internal resistance, build unshakable self-discipline, and win consistently through self-mastery. Starting now. Chapter 1. Accept that you are your own greatest enemy and obstacle. Accepting that you are your own greatest enemy and obstacle transforms external blame into internal accountability, because recognizing self as primary barrier enables self-mastery. The self-enemy principle demonstrates that you sabotage yourself more than circumstances do, that internal obstacles exceed external ones, that blaming others prevents self-mastery, that recognizing self-sabotage enables correction, and that accepting responsibility for self-defeat is first step toward winning. Most people fail through blaming external circumstances for losses, not recognizing self-sabotage patterns destroying success, treating self as victim not obstacle, refusing accountability for self-defeat, and missing that they create most of their problems through own actions. You are your greatest enemy. Self-sabotage prevents winning. Accept responsibility or stay defeated. Research demonstrates that internal locus of control predicts success, that self-awareness enables change, that blaming externally maintains problems, that people who accept self-responsibility improve faster, and that recognizing self as enemy enables becoming ally. The self-sabotage recognition involves identifying how you undermine yourself, recognizing patterns of self-defeat, observing when you create obstacles, noticing self-destructive behaviors, accepting that you are primary problem, and understanding that external circumstances are minor compared to self-created obstacles. The common self-sabotage patterns include procrastinating when action required, quitting when persistence needed, making excuses when responsibility demanded, choosing comfort when growth requires discomfort, breaking promises to yourself, and creating drama preventing progress. The blame elimination means stopping external attribution immediately, ending victim mentality completely, refusing to blame circumstances ever, accepting full responsibility for all outcomes, treating self as cause not effect, and understanding that blaming prevents all growth. The victim mentality destruction involves recognizing when blaming externally, catching yourself making excuses, identifying rationalization patterns, refusing to play victim regardless of circumstances, and understanding that victim thinking is self-sabotage maintaining defeat. The responsibility acceptance shows taking complete ownership of self-defeat, admitting you created obstacles through choices, accepting that circumstances don't determine outcomes, recognizing that only you can change yourself, and understanding that external blame is choosing to stay defeated. The honest self-assessment requires looking at yourself without delusion, identifying exactly how you sabotage success, admitting patterns of self-defeat, recognizing how you create problems, and accepting brutal truth about self-destructive behaviors. The enemy identification means understanding specific ways you undermine yourself, recognizing your weaknesses that create failure, identifying behaviors preventing winning, observing patterns of self-defeat, and treating self-awareness as first step to The implementation requires writing honest assessment of how you sabotage yourself, identifying all specific self-destructive patterns, accepting that you create most obstacles in your life, stopping all external blame immediately, taking complete responsibility for every self-defeat, refusing to play victim under any circumstances, and using acceptance as foundation for self-mastery, treating recognition of self as enemy as first step toward becoming master. You are your greatest enemy. Self-sabotage prevents winning. Accept responsibility or stay defeated. You understand now that you sabotage yourself more than circumstances do, that blaming externally prevents mastery, that recognizing self as primary obstacle enables change, that accepting responsibility is first step, and that Chapter 1 creates foundation by destroying external blame, making self-mastery possible where victim mentality made winning impossible. Chapter 2. Control your emotional reactions. Instead of being controlled by them, controlling emotional reactions instead of being controlled by them builds self-mastery, because emotions that rule you prevent winning. The emotional control principle demonstrates that winners control emotions while losers are controlled, that reactive responses sabotage success, that emotional mastery is fundamental winning skill, that controlling reactions creates power, and that being emotionally controlled guarantees defeat. Most people lose through reacting emotionally without control, being slaves to feelings, letting emotions determine actions, responding impulsively to situations, and lacking emotional discipline preventing success. Emotions that control you prevent winning. Masters control reactions. Choose responses or lose. Research demonstrates that emotional regulation predicts success, that reactive people achieve less, that emotional control improves outcomes, that impulsive reactions create problems, and that people who master emotions win more consistently. The emotional awareness practice involves recognizing emotions before reacting automatically, identifying emotional triggers causing reactions, observing feelings without following them, creating space between stimulus and response, treating emotions as data not commands, and understanding that feeling emotion doesn't require acting on it. The stimulus-response gap creation means developing pause between trigger and reaction, using space to choose response deliberately, preventing automatic emotional reactions, creating time for rational evaluation, and treating gap as power source. The response choice means choosing response instead of reacting automatically, acting deliberately, not impulsively, responding rationally, not emotionally, controlling what you do despite feelings, treating emotional control as fundamental power, and understanding that choice is freedom. The emotional recognition involves noticing emotions as they arise, identifying feelings before they control, catching emotional states early, observing internal reactions, and treating awareness as first control step. The trigger identification means recognizing what causes emotional reactions, understanding patterns in triggers, identifying situations, producing strong emotions, knowing your emotional vulnerabilities, and treating trigger awareness as prevention tool. The deliberate response practice shows pausing before reacting, choosing response consciously, acting based on rational evaluation, not emotion, controlling behavior regardless of feelings, and treating deliberate response as strength. The impulse override involves recognizing impulse to react, stopping automatic response, choosing better reaction, controlling immediate urges, and treating impulse control as fundamental discipline. The emotional discipline building means practicing control consistently, training emotional regulation daily, building capacity to pause, developing response choice ability, and treating emotional mastery as skill requiring practice. The rational evaluation involves assessing situation objectively, evaluating best response logically, considering consequences before acting, making decisions based on reason not emotion, and treating rationality as superior to reactivity. The implementation requires recognizing emotions in real time before they control you, creating deliberate pause before responding to triggers, choosing rational response over emotional reaction, controlling what you do regardless of feelings, practicing emotional discipline consistently, building capacity to observe feelings without following, treating emotions as information not commands, and understanding that emotional mastery enables winning where being controlled by feelings guarantees defeat. Emotions that control you prevent winning. Masters control reactions, choose responses or lose. You understand now that winners control emotions not controlled by them, that reactive responses sabotage success, that choosing deliberate responses creates power, that emotional discipline is fundamental skill, and that Chapter 2 builds control, making winning possible where emotional reactivity made success impossible. Chapter 3. Develop unbreakable self-discipline through daily non-negotiable practices. Developing unbreakable self-discipline through daily non-negotiable practices builds self-mastery, because discipline is foundation of all winning. The discipline principle demonstrates that all success requires self-discipline, that winners have superior self-control, that discipline is practiced daily, not occasionally, that non-negotiable practices build capacity, and that without discipline winning is impossible. Most people lose through lacking consistent discipline, practicing sporadically, not systematically, making excuses to skip practices, treating discipline as optional, and missing that discipline is absolute non-negotiable requirement for winning. Discipline is non-negotiable for winning. Daily practice builds mastery. Practice consistently or lose. Research demonstrates that self-discipline predicts achievement better than talent, that consistent practice builds capacity, that daily discipline creates success, that sporadic effort produces failure, and that disciplined people win consistently. The daily practice establishment involves choosing specific non-negotiable practices, implementing daily without exception, following through regardless of feelings, making practices unbreakable, treating discipline as fundamental requirement, and understanding that daily consistency matters more than intensity. The non-negotiable frame means zero exceptions to practices ever, following through regardless of circumstances, treating practices as mandatory, not optional, building unbreakable routine, making discipline absolute, and understanding that negotiable means not discipline. The practice selection shows choosing practices, building self-mastery, establishing routines requiring discipline, creating habits, demanding consistency, selecting challenges, building capacity, and treating practice choice as strategic. The daily implementation involves executing practices every single day, following through without exception, maintaining consistency regardless, treating daily as absolute requirement, and understanding that missing one day breaks discipline. The excuse elimination for practices means never making excuses to skip, following through despite inconvenience, practicing regardless of feelings, refusing justification for missing, and treating excuses as discipline failure. The discipline progression shows starting with manageable practices, building capacity systematically, increasing difficulty progressively, expanding discipline over time, and treating progression as strength building. The consistency priority means valuing daily practice over intensity, prioritizing showing up over perfection, maintaining routine regardless, treating consistency as supreme, and understanding that daily beats sporadic intensity. The practice tracking involves measuring adherence daily, recording completion consistently, building unbroken streak, celebrating consistency, and treating tracking as accountability. The discipline, accountability, shows using measurement for honesty. Tracking creates responsibility, recording prevents self-deception, monitoring ensures follow-through, and treating accountability as discipline requirement. The self-trust building demonstrates that keeping discipline promises builds self-trust, that following through creates confidence, that consistency proves reliability, that discipline creates self-respect, and that breaking discipline destroys trust. The implementation requires establishing specific daily discipline practices starting immediately, implementing these without exception regardless of circumstances or feelings, following through every single day, making practices absolutely non-negotiable under all conditions, never making excuses to skip, tracking adherence daily, building unbroken consistency streak, treating discipline as fundamental requirement, not optional practice, and understanding that self-discipline is foundation, enabling all winning where lack of discipline guarantees defeat. Discipline is non-negotiable for winning. Daily practice builds mastery. Practice consistently or lose. You understand now that all winning requires discipline, that consistent daily practice builds capacity, that non-negotiable means zero exceptions, that discipline is practiced not wished for, and that Chapter 3 establishes foundation making success possible where undisciplined behavior made winning impossible. Chapter 4. Eliminate all excuses and justifications for failure and weakness. Eliminating all excuses and justifications for failure and weakness builds self-mastery because excuses are verbal self-sabotage preventing winning. The excuse elimination principle demonstrates that excuses maintain weakness, that justification prevents growth, that winners make no excuses ever, that blaming is choosing defeat, and that excuse elimination is absolute strength requirement. Most people lose through making constant excuses for failures, justifying poor performance, blaming circumstances reflexively, rationalizing weakness, and refusing to take absolute responsibility for outcomes. Excuses guarantee defeat. Winners take full ownership, eliminate excuses, or stay losing. Research demonstrates that excuse-making correlates with failure, that accountability enables success, that justification maintains problems, that people who eliminate excuses improve dramatically, and that excuse-free living predicts winning. The excuse identification involves recognizing every excuse made, catching justifications immediately as they arise, identifying blame patterns throughout day, observing rationalizations for failures, treating excuses as weakness indicators, and understanding that every excuse is choice to stay weak. The common excuse patterns include blaming circumstances for failures, justifying poor performance with external factors, rationalizing weakness as beyond control, explaining away failures, making excuses for not following through, and treating excuses as valid when all are invalid. The zero excuse policy means refusing all justification regardless of validity, accepting total responsibility without qualification, taking ownership for everything, never blaming circumstances under any conditions, treating excuses as absolutely prohibited, and understanding that zero means zero. The extreme ownership principle involves taking responsibility even beyond reasonable attribution, owning outcomes completely, accepting blame for everything in your domain, refusing to share responsibility, treating total ownership as strength, and understanding that extreme ownership creates power. The justification destruction means catching rationalization immediately, stopping excuse mid-sentence, refusing to explain away failure, accepting responsibility without softening, and treating justification as excuse in disguise. The circumstance irrelevance shows understanding that external factors don't determine outcomes, that circumstances are explanation, not excuse, that blaming environment maintains weakness, that taking ownership despite circumstances creates strength, and that treating circumstances as determinant is choosing defeat. The victim mentality elimination involves stopping all circumstance blame, ending poor me thinking, refusing to play victim ever, taking complete control mentally, treating yourself as cause not effect, and understanding that victim thinking is verbal self-sabotage. The accountability practice shows reviewing failures without excuses, identifying your contribution to poor outcomes, accepting responsibility without blaming others, learning from mistakes through ownership, and using accountability as growth tool. The excuse replacement means substituting excuse with ownership statement, changing blame to responsibility, transforming justification to accountability, replacing external attribution with internal control, and treating ownership as automatic response. The implementation requires implementing zero excuse policy starting now, catching every excuse and justification the moment they appear, taking complete ownership of all failures without qualification, refusing to blame any circumstances ever, regardless of their validity, accepting total responsibility for everything in your life, stopping excuse mid-sentence when it starts, replacing every excuse with ownership statement, and understanding that eliminating excuses is fundamental requirement, making winning possible where excuse-making guaranteed defeat. Excuses guaranteed defeat. Winners take full ownership, eliminate excuses, or stay losing. You understand now that excuses are verbal self-sabotage, that justification prevents all growth, that winners make zero excuses, that complete ownership creates power, and that Chapter 4 destroys excuse-making, making mastery possible where justification made weakness permanent. Chapter 5. Master delayed gratification, choosing long-term wins over immediate pleasure. Mastering delayed gratification by choosing long-term wins over immediate pleasure builds self-mastery because impulse control determines success or failure. The delayed gratification principle demonstrates that winners sacrifice now for later, that impulse following guarantees failure, that long-term thinking creates winning, that immediate gratification destroys futures, and that delaying pleasure is fundamental skill. Most people lose through choosing immediate pleasure over long-term benefit, being unable to delay gratification, following impulses automatically, prioritizing now over later always, and lacking capacity to sacrifice present for future. Immediate gratification destroys futures. Winners delay and win later. Choose future or lose. Research demonstrates that delayed gratification predicts life success, that impulse control correlates with achievement, that long-term thinking creates better outcomes, that immediate gratification addiction causes failure, and that people who delay consistently win more. The impulse control practice involves recognizing impulses without following them, choosing long-term benefit over immediate pleasure, resisting short-term temptations, prioritizing future over present, treating delayed gratification as fundamental strength, and understanding that impulse following is choosing defeat. The immediate versus delayed framework shows understanding that immediate pleasure costs future success, that short-term gratification prevents long-term winning, that sacrificing now enables winning later, that present focus destroys future, and that delayed gratification is investment in success. The future focus means valuing long-term wins over short-term pleasure, making decisions for future self, not present impulse, sacrificing now for better later, resisting immediate gratification consistently, treating future as priority over present, and understanding that future self deserves present sacrifice. The impulse recognition involves noticing urges for immediate pleasure, identifying short-term temptations, recognizing instant gratification impulses, observing present-focused desires, and treating impulse awareness as control prerequisite. The gratification delay practice shows resisting immediate pleasure deliberately, choosing delayed reward, sacrificing present for future consistently, building capacity to wait, and treating delay as strength training. The long-term thinking development means considering future consequences, evaluating long-term impact of choices, prioritizing distant over immediate rewards, thinking beyond present moment, and treating long-term perspective as success requirement. The present sacrifice acceptance involves understanding that winning requires sacrificing now, that delayed gratification demands present discomfort, that future success costs present pleasure, that sacrifice is investment, and that treating present as expendable enables future winning. The compound benefit recognition shows understanding that delayed gratification compounds over time, that small present sacrifices create large future gains, that consistent delay produces massive results, that compound interest applies to delayed gratification, and that treating delay as investment reveals power. The instant gratification cost awareness means recognizing that immediate pleasure destroys future opportunity, that following impulses prevents winning, that short-term focus guarantees long-term failure, that instant gratification is borrowing from future, and that treating immediate pleasure as expensive makes delay easier. The implementation requires recognizing impulses for immediate pleasure the moment they arise, choosing long-term benefit instead of short-term gratification, resisting immediate temptations consistently, prioritizing future self over present impulse, sacrificing present pleasure for future success, building capacity to delay gratification systematically, and understanding that mastering delayed gratification enables winning where impulse following guaranteed defeat. Immediate gratification destroys futures. Winners delay and win later. Choose future or lose. You understand now that impulse control determines success, that winners sacrifice present for future, that delayed gratification is fundamental skill, that immediate pleasure prevents long-term winning, and that Chapter 5 builds future focus, making success possible where present focus made failure inevitable. Chapter 6. Control your thoughts instead of being controlled by negative thinking. Controlling your thoughts instead of being controlled by negative thinking builds self-mastery because mental control determines outcomes. The thought control principle demonstrates that thoughts that control you prevent winning, that negative thinking creates losing, that mental mastery is fundamental skill, that controlling mind enables success, and that being thought-controlled guarantees defeat. Most people lose through being controlled by negative thoughts, believing every thought automatically, following destructive thinking, being unable to direct mind, and lacking mental discipline preventing success. Negative thoughts controlled prevent winning. Masters direct thinking. Control mind or lose. Research demonstrates that thought control improves outcomes, that negative thinking correlates with failure, that mental discipline predicts success, that people controlled by thoughts achieve less, and that thought mastery enables consistent winning. The thought observation involves recognizing thoughts without following them automatically, catching negative thinking before it controls, observing mind without being controlled, creating distance from thoughts, treating thoughts as events, not truth, and understanding that you are not your thoughts. The thought self-separation means understanding you are observer, not thoughts themselves, that thoughts are mental events you witness, that identifying with thoughts creates control, that separation enables choice, and that treating thoughts as separate creates power. The negative thought catching involves identifying destructive thinking immediately, recognizing negative patterns as they arise, catching self-defeating thoughts early, observing negativity before it spreads, and treating catching as first control step. The thought direction means choosing thoughts deliberately instead of following automatically, directing mental focus intentionally, controlling what you think about, refusing destructive thinking, treating mind as tool to command, and understanding that thought direction is choice. The thought replacement practice shows substituting negative with constructive thinking, changing destructive to productive thoughts, replacing defeating with empowering thinking, transforming negative patterns automatically, and treating replacement as systematic practice. The mental discipline building involves practicing thought control consistently, training mental regulation daily, building capacity to direct mind, developing thought mastery systematically, and treating mental control as skill requiring practice. The negative thinking patterns include catastrophizing outcomes, expecting failure, doubting abilities, focusing on problems, ruminating on negatives, and treating negative patterns as automatic requiring interruption. The thought-stopping technique means recognizing destructive thought, saying stop internally, redirecting attention deliberately, refusing to continue negative thinking, and treating thought-stopping as practiced skill. The constructive focus involves directing mind toward productive thinking, choosing empowering thoughts deliberately, focusing on solutions not problems, maintaining constructive mental patterns, and treating positive focus as discipline. The meditation practice shows observing thoughts without following, sitting with mind without control, building thought observation capacity, practicing mental discipline, and treating meditation as thought mastery training. The implementation requires observing thoughts without automatically following them, catching negative thinking the moment it appears, redirecting mind toward constructive focus immediately, controlling what you think about consistently, practicing mental discipline daily, building capacity to direct thinking, treating thoughts as controllable, not controlling, refusing to follow destructive thinking patterns, and understanding that thought mastery enables winning where being controlled by negative thinking guaranteed defeat. Negative thoughts controlled prevent winning. Masters direct thinking, control mind or lose. You understand now that thoughts are controllable, that negative thinking creates defeat, that mental mastery is fundamental skill, that directing thoughts is power, and that Chapter 6 builds mental control, making success possible where thought control made winning impossible. Chapter 7. Build physical discipline through consistent training and hardship. Building physical discipline through consistent training and hardship creates self-mastery because physical control builds mental control. The physical discipline principle demonstrates that physical training builds mental strength, that body discipline creates mind discipline, that consistent physical challenge builds overall mastery, that avoiding physical hardship maintains weakness, and that physical training is fundamental self-mastery requirement. Most people lose through avoiding physical challenge, lacking consistent training, choosing physical comfort always, not recognizing body-mind connection, and missing that physical discipline builds total mastery. Physical discipline builds mental mastery. Consistent training creates control. Train body or stay weak. Research demonstrates that physical training improves mental discipline, that exercise builds self-control capacity, that consistent physical challenge creates overall capacity, that sedentary living correlates with weakness, and that physical discipline transfers to all life areas. The physical training requirement involves implementing consistent physical challenge, training body regularly, without exception, embracing physical hardship deliberately, pushing through physical discomfort, treating physical discipline as non-negotiable, and understanding that body training is mind training. The body-mind connection shows understanding that training body strengthens mind, that physical discipline creates mental discipline, that pushing body builds mental capacity, that physical challenge develops overall strength, and that treating body training as mental training reveals connection. The hardship embrace means seeking physical difficulty deliberately, training through discomfort consistently, choosing hard physical work, avoiding comfort systematically, treating physical challenge as strength building, and understanding that easy physical life creates weak mind. The consistent training practice involves establishing regular physical training, implementing without exception, maintaining consistency regardless, pushing bodies systematically, and treating consistency as supreme over intensity. The physical discomfort tolerance shows building capacity through exposure, increasing hardship progressively, embracing pain as growth, pushing beyond comfortable, and treating discomfort as teacher. The training types include strength training, building capacity; cardiovascular challenge, building endurance; difficult physical labor, building toughness; cold exposure, building resilience; and treating variety as comprehensive development. The physical challenge progression means starting with manageable difficulty, increasing challenge systematically, building capacity progressively, expanding limits over time, and treating progression as strength development. The comfort rejection involves actively avoiding physical ease, choosing harder physical path, adding difficulty to routine, refusing comfortable options, and treating comfort as weakness source. The cold exposure practice shows using cold showers daily, exposing body to cold deliberately, building cold tolerance systematically, treating cold as discipline training, and understanding that cold builds mental strength. The hard physical work means choosing difficult labor, doing physically demanding tasks, avoiding easy physical options, embracing strenuous activity, and treating hard work as training. The implementation requires establishing consistent physical training practice starting immediately, implementing without exception regardless of feelings, embracing physical hardship and discomfort deliberately, pushing body regularly through challenge, maintaining training consistency absolutely, building physical discipline as foundation, treating body training as mind training, avoiding physical comfort systematically, and understanding that physical discipline builds total self, enabling winning where physical weakness maintained overall weakness. Physical discipline builds mental mastery. Consistent training creates control. Train body or stay weak. You understand now that physical training builds mental strength, that body discipline creates mind discipline, that consistent challenge builds capacity, that avoiding hardship maintains weakness, and that Chapter 7 builds physical foundation, making total mastery possible where physical neglect made mental weakness inevitable. Chapter 8. Master your words, speaking only truth and keeping all promises. Mastering your words by speaking only truth and keeping all promises builds self-mastery, because word control creates self-trust, enabling winning. The word mastery principle demonstrates that keeping word to self builds mastery, that speaking truth creates integrity, that breaking promises destroys self-trust, that lying to self prevents winning, and that word control is fundamental discipline. Most people lose through breaking promises to themselves, speaking carelessly without discipline, not keeping word consistently, lying to themselves regularly, and lacking verbal discipline, preventing self-trust. Broken promises destroy self-trust. Masters keep word always. Honor commitments or lose. Research demonstrates that keeping commitments predicts success, that word integrity builds self-trust, that promise breaking correlates with failure, that people who keep word win more, and that verbal discipline creates overall mastery. The promise keeping involves making commitments carefully, not casually, keeping every promise made to self, following through on word always, treating promises as absolutely binding, building self-trust through kept commitments, and understanding that broken promises destroy free self-respect. The careful commitment making means promising only what you'll do, not making casual commitments, treating every promise seriously, understanding that word is bond, and making promises deliberately. The follow-through requirement shows honoring every commitment made, keeping word regardless of difficulty, following through despite inconvenience, treating promises as non-negotiable, and understanding that keeping word is character. The self-promise priority involves treating commitments to self as most important, keeping word to yourself first, valuing self-promises as binding, prioritizing self-commitments, and understanding that self-trust is foundation. The truth speaking means speaking only truth always, refusing to lie to self or others, being honest in all communication, eliminating deception completely, treating truth as non-negotiable, and understanding that lying destroys integrity. The self-honesty practice shows being truthful with yourself about reality, refusing self-deception, acknowledging truth regardless of comfort, seeing self clearly, and treating honesty as fundamental. The verbal discipline involves controlling words carefully, speaking deliberately, not carelessly, saying only what you mean, meaning what you say, and treating words as powerful, requiring discipline. The lie elimination means refusing all deception, stopping lies immediately, being honest regardless, eliminating false words, and treating lying as self-betrayal. The word-action alignment shows ensuring words match actions, doing what you say, making words and deeds consistent, treating alignment as integrity, and understanding that misalignment is lying. The self-trust building demonstrates that kept promises build self-trust, that following through creates confidence, that word integrity proves reliability, that honoring commitments creates self-respect, and that breaking word destroys trust. The broken promise cost shows understanding that every broken promise damages self-trust, that word breaking trains unreliability, that promise destruction prevents mastery, that broken commitments compound weakness, and that treating promises as breakable destroys foundation. The implementation requires making commitments to yourself carefully and deliberately, keeping every single promise made regardless of difficulty, following through on word always without exception, treating self-promises as absolutely binding contracts, speaking only truth, eliminating all deception, being honest with yourself about reality, controlling words with discipline, ensuring words and actions align perfectly, and understanding that word mastery builds self-trust, enabling winning where broken promises guaranteed self-defeat. Broken promises destroy self-trust. Masters keep word always, honor commitments or lose. You understand now that keeping word builds self-trust, that broken promises destroy mastery, that truth-speaking creates integrity, that word control is fundamental discipline, and that Chapter 8 builds trust foundation, making success possible where broken word made self-betrayal inevitable. Chapter 9. Develop systematic self-monitoring tracking. All behaviors and progress. Developing systematic self-monitoring by tracking all behaviors and progress builds self-mastery because measurement creates accountability and improvement. The self-monitoring principle demonstrates that tracking behaviors creates awareness, that measurement drives improvement, that systematic monitoring enables mastery, that what gets measured gets mastered, and that without tracking self-deception continues unchecked. Most people lose through not tracking behaviors at all, lacking measurement systems completely, being unaware of actual actions, operating without data, and missing that monitoring is absolute mastery requirement. Without tracking, self-deception continues. Measurement creates mastery. Monitor systematically or stay blind. Research demonstrates that self-monitoring improves behaviors dramatically, that tracking creates accountability, that measurement drives change, that people who monitor progress achieve significantly more, and that systematic tracking enables self-mastery. The tracking practice involves measuring all key behaviors daily, recording progress systematically, creating accountability through data, using metrics to drive improvement, treating tracking as non-negotiable practice, and understanding that measurement makes invisible visible. The behavior measurement means quantifying actions daily, not relying on memory, tracking adherence to practices precisely, measuring progress toward goals specifically, using data for self-awareness, treating numbers as objective accountability, and understanding that feelings lie but data reveals truth. The daily recording shows writing measurements every day, maintaining tracking system consistently, recording data immediately, building unbroken tracking streak, and treating daily recording as discipline. The metric selection involves choosing specific, measurable behaviors, establishing clear quantifiable targets, creating trackable outcomes, defining success metrics, and treating measurement as starting point. The tracking system establishment means creating simple, sustainable tracking method, using tools enabling consistent recording, establishing routine for measurement, making tracking easy, and treating system as enabler. The data review practice shows analyzing tracked data regularly, identifying patterns in behaviors, recognizing trends over time, using data to adjust approach, and treating review as learning opportunity. The accountability creation demonstrates that tracking creates responsibility, that measurement prevents self-deception, that recording ensures honesty, that data shows truth, and that treating tracking as accountability tool prevents lying to self. The self-deception prevention shows understanding that without tracking you deceive yourself, that feelings mislead about reality, that memory distorts actual behavior, that tracking reveals truth, and that treating measurement as reality check prevents delusion. The progress visibility means that tracking makes improvement visible, that measurement shows growth, that data proves progress, that numbers demonstrate change, and that treating visibility as motivation maintains effort. The tracking categories include discipline, practice, adherence, goal progress, measurement, behavior frequency, recording, time usage tracking, and treating comprehensive monitoring as complete picture. The consistency measurement shows tracking how often you follow through, measuring adherence to commitments, recording consistency rates, calculating reliability percentages, and treating consistency as primary metric. The implementation requires establishing systematic tracking of all key behaviors, starting immediately, measuring adherence daily without exception, recording data honestly and accurately, using tracking data to drive improvement, creating accountability through measurement, reviewing data regularly for patterns, treating tracking as non-negotiable mastery practice, preventing self-deception through objective measurement, and understanding that systematic self-monitoring enables mastery where operating without data guaranteed self-deception and failure. Without tracking, self-deception continues. Measurement creates mastery. Monitor systematically or stay blind. You understand now that tracking creates awareness, that measurement drives improvement, that data prevents self-deception, that monitoring is accountability, and that Chapter 9 builds measurement system making mastery possible, where lack of tracking made self-deception inevitable. Chapter 10. Win consistently through total self-mastery, integration and practice. Winning consistently through total self-mastery, integration and practice creates sustainable success because integrated mastery enables winning at everything. The integration principle demonstrates that partial mastery produces partial results, that total integration creates consistent winning, that practicing all elements together builds complete mastery, that systematic integration enables sustainable success, and that winning requires integrating all self-mastery elements simultaneously. Most people lose through practicing elements inconsistently, not integrating mastery completely, focusing on single aspect while ignoring others, lacking systematic total practice, and missing that winning requires complete self-mastery, not partial effort. Partial mastery produces partial results. Total integration creates consistent winning. Master completely or lose. Research demonstrates that integrated practice produces superior results, that total mastery creates consistent winning, that partial efforts produce partial outcomes, that systematic integration enables sustained success, and that complete self-mastery predicts winning at everything. The integration practice involves implementing all mastery elements together simultaneously, practicing complete system daily without exception, maintaining all disciplines at once, treating mastery as total not partial, building integrated self-command across all domains, and understanding that leaving any element unpracticed creates weakness, undermining everything. The complete system implementation shows using all 10 mastery elements daily, accepting self as enemy, controlling emotions, maintaining discipline, eliminating excuses, delaying gratification, controlling thoughts, training physically, keeping word, tracking everything, and treating integration as non-negotiable. The simultaneous practice means maintaining all elements at once, not sequentially, practicing everything together daily, treating mastery as complete package, understanding that partial practice produces weakness, and recognizing that integration is requirement, not option. The mastery element review shows accepting self-responsibility completely, controlling all emotional reactions, maintaining unbreakable discipline, making zero excuses ever, choosing future over present always, directing all thoughts, training body consistently, keeping every promise, tracking all behaviors, and treating review as system check. The weak link elimination involves identifying which mastery element is weakest, focusing on weakest area specifically, strengthening weak points deliberately, ensuring no element is neglected, and treating weakest link as priority. The consistent winning means using complete mastery to win at everything, applying self-command to all life areas, achieving goals through total discipline, succeeding consistently through integrated control, treating winning as mastery result, and understanding that mastery enables winning while lack prevents it. The application domains show using mastery for career success, relationship winning, health achievement, financial success, personal growth, and treating mastery as universal winning tool. The sustainable practice shows maintaining all elements indefinitely, treating mastery as lifelong practice, understanding that mastery never ends, continuing all disciplines permanently, and recognizing that stopping any element breaks mastery. The winning consistency means that integrated mastery produces reliable results, that complete self-command enables consistent success, that total practice creates predictable winning, that mastery removes luck from equation, and that treating winning as mastery outcome reveals power. The total self-mastery life demonstrates living with complete self-command, winning at everything through discipline, achieving all goals through control, succeeding consistently through mastery, and treating mastered life as available to anyone willing to practice. The implementation requires integrating all 10 self-mastery elements into complete daily practice system, implementing total practice immediately, without delay, maintaining all elements simultaneously, never neglecting any, using complete mastery to win at everything consistently, treating mastery as lifelong practice requiring daily commitment, understanding that partial practice produces partial results, while total integration creates consistent winning, and recognizing that mastering yourself completely is prerequisite for winning at anything, making all success possible where self-enslavement made all winning impossible. Partial mastery produces partial results. Total integration creates consistent winning. Master completely or lose. You have learned how to master yourself and win through complete integration of all mastery elements, enabling consistent winning at everything through total self-command. You have learned how to master yourself and win. Accept that you are your greatest enemy. Control emotional reactions. Develop unbreakable self-discipline. Eliminate all excuses. Master delayed gratification. Control your thoughts. Build physical discipline. Master your words. Develop systematic self-monitoring. Win consistently through total integration. What matters now is implementing complete self-mastery, starting immediately. 5. Implementation priorities. Accept responsibility for self-sabotage. Establish daily non-negotiable discipline practices. Eliminate all excuses completely. Implement systematic behavior tracking. Integrate all mastery elements into total practice. Execute these systematically. Build complete self-command and win consistently. Stop losing to yourself and start mastering self-command. Stop being controlled by impulses and start winning through discipline. Master your reactions. Control your behaviors. Overcome internal resistance. Build unshakable self-discipline and win consistently through self-mastery, starting now.